One of the biggest trust killers in coaching isn't bad programming, bad marketing, or bad sales. It's being one person on the front end and a completely different person on the back end. Polite, agreeable, afraid to rock the boat before the sale, then suddenly direct, challenging, high standards once the invoice clears. Here's why coaches do this, and let's just be honest about it. They're scared of losing the lead. They're scared of confrontation. They think sales equals pleasing. They think coaching equals challenging. So they people please to get someone in, then try to lead them once they're trapped. That's not leadership. That's insecurity. And let's look at the psychology of this. This is probably the important bit. Humans calibrate trust early. When someone meets you, their nervous system is asking one question: is this person consistent? If you're agreeable, soft, and non-direct at first, their brain categorizes you as safe, non-threatening, and non-authoritative. So when you suddenly challenge them later, their nervous system doesn't hear leadership. It hears, what the fuck is this? The first time you challenge someone shouldn't feel like a personality change. And here's why this breaks trust in the coaching relationship. This is why clients end up saying things like, you've changed. You weren't like this at the beginning. I didn't sign up for this. Or they just stop responding to you. And they're not wrong. You trained them to expect one version of you and then gave them another. My online coaching business averaged a 24-month retention rate with its lowest ever annual churn of 2.4%. And I credit that to showing up and being seen as who I am and doing my job consistently, whether someone paid me or whether they didn't. And I'm going to give you an insight into how you can potentially do the same. So let's dive in. So here we have Heath Ledger as the Joker and Bryan Cranston as Walter White. Now, the thing is, when it comes to consistency, you'll understand this when retrospectively looking back on films, movies, series, because you expect Heath Ledger as the Joker to be a mad cunt. You expect him to do mad shit. You expect him to be a bad bastard. You expect him to be a consistent villain. Whereas, for example, in Breaking Bad, you start to see trust being broken in Walter White's family, with friends, in his place of work, so on and so forth, because he was once one person, this submissive people pleaser that was a bit of a pushover to his wife, who then started to become this drug lord. And don't get me wrong, you still saw some of those consistent parts of him throughout in certain situations. But when he started to become Heisenberg, you started to realise that he was no longer being as consistent, and his actions were then starting to break the trust of his family. This is how coaching works, right? So if you're this amazing person that people look up to in social media through your marketing, and then they come on board, and you're initially the same person, but then you start to change over time, it breaks trust and people will churn, right? Just like Walter's wife, even though she's a pain in the arse in Breaking Bad, ends up over time obviously wanting to leave him. His son, again, really annoying, turns his back on him. Now, they're both really annoying as characters, but they're amazing actors because that's how they're supposed to make you feel. But with this, you need to understand how it applies to you. And these are some of the things that I'm basically going to go through here. We know that the brain loves predictability, right? It promotes a sense of safety. This is created through consistency because predictability builds trust. So this is why I always say I will challenge people that are in my DMs on my social media platform looking to work with me, because if I enable them to think a certain way and then I try and change how they think when they come on board, we've started off on completely the wrong foot. Because if I've agreed with them just to be agreeable and try and be a people pleaser and try and get them on board, they'll essentially think, okay, well, I'm right. I know more than I actually maybe thought I did, because this person is validating the fact that I'm correct because they didn't tell me that I'm wrong. So see how that one simple interaction can make someone think that something that's wrong could be right just because you want to make them feel good about themselves to get a sale. So then what happens when they start to bring out certain beliefs about their business, about themselves, your clients, about their nutrition, their training, their overall health? And you'll hear it all the time, like carbs make you fat. If you don't eat enough, you'll go into starvation mode. Like all of this bullshit. If you don't nip that in the bud when you hear it, then essentially you are enabling, you're not coaching, you're just letting someone walk all over the top of you because you're letting them do it because you want something from them. Whereas actually authoritative figures are supportive yet challenging. So I can see and understand why you would think that way. But How has that worked out for you so far? Right? You're challenging without being a dick there. And this is why I challenge people on the front end, not just in the back end with my clients, because it's easier to then challenge in the back end when I've challenged them on the front end. And when I say challenging, like I just gave you an example there, that's not me being a dick, right? That's how being challenging a lot of the time will come across. So we need to understand that if you want to be two different types of people, then you're being inconsistent, you're being unpredictable, and that will break trust. So if a client that you have enabled, and let's be clear, you'll all have had a client like this. If you've had a client that you've enabled to believe what they want, do what they want, and then it gets to a point in time where you're like, I can't take this anymore, and you do challenge them, and they don't take it lightly, then you'll know exactly what I mean by your frustration building as a result of not doing the hard thing, the perceived hard thing at the time in which you should have done it, right? Because that's what it all comes down to. Most people just avoid the hard shit that they need to do. If I see any pattern, any trend from any client that will suggest that it'll do them more harm than good over time, regardless of how tired I am, how bad a day I've had, how much shit's happening around me, I will still make sure that I identify that pattern and trend. So let's say, for example, last week, because most people, they end up when your clients will think you're a robot, and my clients will sometimes think I'm a robot. But last week, right, second week of the month, we got an eviction notice last year when our landlord was selling the property that we are currently in Dubai. So he sold it to someone else, who then sold it to someone else, but because he was selling the property, he had to give the eviction notice. So the new landlord, who is a local here, bought the property back at the end of November, and we've been trying to get in touch with him since to be like, do we need to leave at the end of March? Just want us to stay here? And he's like, yeah, I would like you to stay, but he also wants to put our rate up by nearly £10,000 a year, right? It's just about £9,000. So he wants to put it up by like £9,000 a year. Our washing machine broke. I needed to get 4 new tyres for the car. One of our aircon thermostats broke in the room of the apartment, in our room of the apartment. So there was a multitude of different things, right? It would have been so easy when I was talking to any client on any day last week to be like, yeah, just fucking do what you want. But I can't because I know the consequence of that. And I take pride in what I do. And if you take pride in what you do and you understand that you don't want to be running into consequences further down the line, you sometimes have to pick the hard thing now so it's actually easy later, regardless of what type of day you're having. That means showing up with the same energy, the same communication style, the same level of investment, the same balance of support and challenge, the same focus on the goal, and a shared understanding of how you're going to get there every single day, right? Every single day. Like I said, it doesn't matter about conditions, circumstances, context. You need to show up like that every single day. Obviously, if something has happened and you cannot get back to people, don't go back to them with abstract answers. Go back and say, listen, X, Y, and Z happened right now. I'm going to be out of office for the next 24 hours. I'll come back to you with a more detailed answer at that point. You just need to keep people in the loop, right? Because that's consistent. Coach is an outcome-focused intervention. Its sole purpose is to deliver a result. So you need to remember that. Be mindful of your definition of a result and what you're doing to prevent the outcome. So here's an insight. Most coaches' definition of a result is before and after picture, outcome with a performance goal, anything tangible, right? And don't get me wrong, tangible goals are important because it's all about results in the fitness industry. But it doesn't mean that result is the most important thing and it's the only result that you can get people. And this is where you need to be very mindful of your actions throughout that process and what you're actually doing to hinder or prevent the result taking place. So let's say, for example, you have a client who is dieting for a photo shoot, and that client wants to diet for a photo shoot, but their goal long-term is to stay in pretty good nick all year round. But let's say 8 to 10 weeks out of the photo shoot, they start to experience some unusual eating patterns of behaviour that suggest that there may be some emotional issues around food, especially with restriction involved. You sometimes need to go, okay, well, let's see if this is a one-time thing or like if this is a consistent thing, like what can we put in place to potentially overcome this in the future? What did you go through? What triggered this situation? You need to obviously dig deeper and then look at, okay, is there anything we can put in place to stabilise this and make it better? But then, following week it happens again, following week it happens again, following week it happens again, following week it happens again. If all you're doing is going, let's just get to the photo shoot and then we can think about this after, you're preventing the result that they actually want. Because you might get them to the photo shoot. Is the photo shoot, because you could always move it. Is the photo shoot actually going to resemble the hard work that they could have put in if these things were focused on and eradicated? And how much more damage is that going to do to the longer term goal of wanting to maintain a leaner body image year round if you're not focusing on why these things are happening? So a lot of the time coaches can actually be preventing the goal when they're working towards the goal that they've agreed with the client, because they're not actually looking at the risks and the consequences of what could come to light as a result of just wanting the tangible outcome, the visual response. Live by a set of rules. So this is our code of ethics inside of Built for Coaches. So we have contracting, commitment, and confidentiality. We call it the 3 C's. So we basically put this together because we want coaches to have a set of rules they live by, right? Standards they live by, ethics they live by, right? So that they have some form of direction in a very toxic industry that is obviously unregulated, so that regardless of what other people are doing, they know what to stand by. So let's look at contracting, commitment, and confidentiality. Before entering into a coaching relationship with a client, coaches will establish and agree a coaching contract that sets out the terms of the relationship from a financial, logistical, and ethical standpoint. Built to Coach graduates will pride themselves on honesty and integrity in the coaching process, being fully transparent with the prospective client on the journey ahead, a realistic time frame, achievable outcomes, and how the relationship will work. Not, I can get you 5 stone off in 12 weeks. Coaches will commit to a strict confidentiality agreement with clients, seeking permission before sharing progress pictures, weight updates, or any information shared by the client in the coaching relationship. Explicit permission must be requested each time you'd like to share personal information. Coaches will ensure that the duration of the contract is appropriate to achieve the client's goals and will actively work to promote the client's independence, self-reliance, and sense of empowerment. So look at that just for a set code of ethics to begin with. Very clear. Really sets the tone and puts the boundaries in place for what's acceptable and what's not. You need to be able to stand for something, because as everyone else is following the same trend, the same patterns, the same bullshit, you will stand out more if you follow something real and you're ethical and you're authentic and you have integrity. Then we've got professional integrity, practice, and conduct. Coaches will uphold a consistent high standard of practice in all coaching relationships and maintain strong ethical boundaries with clients to keep themselves and clients safe. Coaches will only work with the remit they are qualified to work within. So none of this, I'm a mindset coach and I can fucking help you overcome your trauma, right? See this that I'm seeing in the industry these days. Stay in your fucking lane. Please just stay in your fucking lane. Coaches will only work within their remit, as I said, and will refer clients who need additional support that they can't provide the relevant help to the correct professionals. Coaches will keep relationships with clients fully professional for the duration of the coaching term and hold necessary boundaries in place with the relationship to achieve this. Well, first rule, right? One of the first rules of Built to Coach, so just a reminder, Built for Coaches is made up of Built for Business and Built to Coach. So this is the Built to Coach system inside of Built for Coaches. One of the number one rules in Built to Coach is you do not shag your clients. Just don't do it. Don't shit where you eat. Don't overstep that boundary. Don't break trust with someone like that, right? See, even if they are flirtatious, even if they are kind of coming on to you, right? It's happened to me in my career. Don't know how, right? Fucking bald bastard, right? But it still happened because there's a sense of potential authority, right? Someone's in good shape, X, Y, and Z. It's happened to me, but I put the boundary in place, right? I actually had some scenarios where clients texted me at weekends when they were a little bit drunk and asked if I wanted to come over and stuff. And I was like, no, it's okay. I'll see you next week. I hope you have a good night. So it's important that you don't cross that boundary for reputation's sake, right? Control your fucking impulses. That goes for everyone, right? It's not just men. Coaches will keep relationships with clients fully professional, as I said. Coaches will only set outcomes with clients they know is within their professional capacity to achieve. And coaches will provide evidence of qualifications, professional development, and relevant experience to clients upon their request. This is why, again, you need to have integrity. You need to make sure as well that if you are going through a consistent development process, that you keep the receipts, but also you just, at the very least, have your fucking level 3. The amount of people that are getting into the fitness industry without even having respect for entry-level qualifications is, quite frankly, sickening. Because if you don't respect that, then it tells me that you're probably not going to respect ongoing education throughout the process. Excellence in coaching and practice and continuing professional development. Coaches will ensure that they're in a fit state of mind to practice and will be honest with clients when they aren't in the best position to practice safely. Like I said to you earlier on, if something's went on and you need to tell a client that you can't get back to them that day and you'll be back with more detail tomorrow because you're not in the right headspace, you're not in a position to practice coaching safely, then you'll get back to them tomorrow and you'll do that. Coaches will have the correct level of self-awareness to know when their own internal bias, beliefs, and values are impacting their ability to coach objectively and attend supervision if they feel it's impacting the quality of their sessions. At supervision, we basically run a 3-tiered model. Tier 1 is all about current client issues, Tier 2 is all about your coaching issues, and Tier 3 is all about issues outside of you and your client's control. So issues that are wicked issues, as we like to call them. A wicked issue is essentially where a client has a medical condition that impairs their ability to train correctly, but they're going to live with that condition for the rest of their life. It's not how can we fix this condition, but it's how can we move forward and adapt while working alongside this condition. It's if a client runs a business that they are really stressed out by, but they're never going to give it up, kind of like a wicked issue, right? So it's like, this is my livelihood, this puts food on the table, this business is my one true love. Again, kind of wicked issue. So coaches will always make sure that they practice safely at all times. Coaches will have the correct level of self-awareness to know when their beliefs are impacting their decision-making, and bring it along to supervision and say, this is where I'm seeing my coaching be impacted as a result of how I see this client. Coaches will commit to being lifelong learners and engage in regular coaching, supervision, and continuous professional development to ensure they continue to refine and grow their skills and practice effectively. Coaching supervision, like I said, is all about making sure that we can constantly help you just become better in all areas as a coach, with certain client scenarios and also with scenarios that are outside of your control and you cannot fix, but you need to support the client through anyway, the wicked issues. And what we always see is the people that commit to coach for the longest and constantly refine their skills and make their skills better are always the people that end up being the best coaches. Coaches will engage in regular reflective practice to ensure they continuously learn from their own experience and use this to guide their areas of development. So like if you're having clients churn because you're breaking trust with them, for example, on a consistent basis, you should already have reflected on that and been able to identify that there's a fucking problem somewhere. Right, so are you leading or managing? So we actually have a leadership assessment. And let's look at these two different things, right? Leadership and management often get confused. Here's the thing. Most people that want to be leaders are usually managers, right? Leaders usually never want to be leaders. They just end up becoming leaders as a result of who they are and how they do things the same way consistently everywhere, where people see them and when people don't, right? So here's leading. You platform yourself when you're a leader. So this is where you become an inspirational figure who shows a desirable way of living in true alignment with their values, operating from a place of confidence and self-belief while remaining relatable, empathetic, and connected to their clients. They don't label their clients as victims, but are cautious about why they think the way that they do and have a commitment to supporting them to change it. Whereas people who are managers, right, and not doing much leading, they pedestal themselves. So the biggest barrier we see to great leadership across the industry is coaches continuously pedestaling themselves as out of touch and out of reach from their clients, making their struggles unrelatable to you and your goals unattainable to them. This creates a dangerous dynamic for both client and coach and risks the coaching relationship from being successful. So these are only 4 different parts of this entire leadership breakdown that we have. The next one is not every problem has a solution. So leaders recognize wicked issues, like I was already saying. Problems that have no solution. Wicked issues are complex and multifaceted and often involve learning how to live alongside a challenge and minimize its impact instead of wasting time and energy trying to solve something that has no solution. versus a manager who needs to find a solution. So trying to solve every problem your clients come to you with and feeling out of your depth with the things you don't know the answer to. You eventually run out of tips and tricks and they still come back with the same problems time and time again, leaving you to question if you're working with the right kind of people. And this is because you turn into fixer. We see this all the time. We've had conversations with clients just this week. We are, for example, a client of ours has a client who is going to Australia at the end of March and wants to lose weight, but they're emotionally eating multiple times per week and saying things like, I still see myself as a 220-pound woman when I now weigh 150 pounds, for example. And the client keeps on saying, I think we need to drop the calories. When are we really going to go hard on this dieting process for Australia at the end of March? And the coach has been coming to us also looking for a solution. So like, how do I fix this? How do I fix this? They've not been saying that explicitly, but every time we go back and say something, they then push a little bit further and are like, how do I fix this though? She's came back with this. How would I approach this though? How do like I give her what she wants? And we say in situations like this, and did say, your need to fix the issue here is the problem. Sometimes, and I've said this so many times throughout so many of my YouTubes and so much of my content, sometimes you need to pick the hard right over the easy wrong. You need to stand for something. I have told clients in the past that if they want to not take my advice on board and make things worse, then I will not be a part of their journey. Because I refuse for that to be tied to my reputation and for someone to say, Mark enabled me to do this, Mark let me do this, Mark helped me do this, and things got worse. I'm not willing to do that. But when you fall into fixer mode and think that that's your responsibility to find solutions and become accommodating and find answers for someone who's demanding them, when actually you know what the consequences of that look like, then you're just running a really big risk of doing that for more and more clients over time, ultimately doing more and more damage over time, and then getting to a stage where you're questioning whether or not you can even coach effectively, which you probably can't at that stage, because if you've just been falling into like manager mode, problem solving mode, fixer mode, you've not been doing much real coaching. But we have a huge leadership assessment to basically get you to understand where you're leading and where you're managing so you can change it. And this is where this shit works, right? We're good at this stuff, right? We're good at this stuff and we talk about this stuff because we're good at it, right? So let's look at this piece of social proof from one of our former students, Emily, who for 2025, from January until July, had 0% churn. 0% churn when the previous period was 17 to 18%. 0%. 0% churn even good? Was that good? Right? 0% churn. We've had Paddy, who's closing in on over 100 sales now, reduces churn in the last 90 days by 91%. Alex, when he first joined, built the coach in 5 months. He had 2 times his MRR. He had an 80% close rate and a sub 1% churn. Poddy reduced his churn by 7% consistently, from 10% consistently to 3%. Domain had sub 1% churn and 100% close rate in 5 months. And here's even some of our frameworks that we use. One of our clients had basically taken away our milestone planner, which is a real goal setting tool and framework that is rooted in the way in which people's minds work, and used it with a client who was going to leave, and they recommitted for 3 months, right? And here's the thing with this. Here's the thing with all of this. And I think it's very, very important to note. If you want to keep doing the same shit you've always done with your clients, you're going to continue to get the same results. If you want to build your business, you need both acquisition and retention. The best way to retain is to coach more effectively, and the best way to acquire is to retain and coach more effectively. Let me tell you why. You might have seen from some of those pieces of social proof there that our clients had 100% close rate, 8% close rate, some of which that I've not even shared here closed up to 15K across their time in our educational process. This was before the business process came to light, by the way. So had 100% close rate, sub 1% churn, had collected something like 15K in new clients across that time frame as well, just purely from becoming a better coach. Because a lot of people will tell you not to coach on sales calls. But that's because a lot of people don't know what coaching is. When you coach on sales calls, you're actually going to close more calls than not coaching. Because when people say don't coach on sales calls, they mean don't mentor or teach, right? Mentoring, as I've said before, all about telling someone what worked for you or another successful client and teaching someone information that they didn't currently know that would potentially help them get to where they need to be. So what they say by don't coach is don't give someone answers, don't give someone value, don't teach someone. whereas coaching is leading someone towards their own outcome. So these coaches got better at coaching and actually increased their revenue, their close rate, and their retention rate. And I used to say this a lot to coaches that I used to work with in a previous mentorship that I worked on. I used to say, I just coach on sales calls. And they say, but we were told not to coach on sales calls. And I didn't, yeah, but that's not the way that I coach. Like, I actually coach. I have coaching conversations the same way that I would help a client basically overcome something challenging and find their own answers, and we would get to an outcome. I do the exact same thing on sales calls. That simple. But you're not going to be able to effectively know how to do that unless you know how to coach. And that, for 2026, if you want to take your business seriously, if you want to take your reputation seriously, if you want to take your craft seriously, should be the number one thing that you double down on, because the amount of areas that this will help you understand and improve on in your business, just like marketing, because it's all about psychology and how people think, will give you the biggest ROI that potentially any other mentorship has ever given you. Right, team, if you're scared to challenge someone before the sale, you're not protecting the relationship, you're delaying the fucking rupture. Because trust isn't built by being liked. Trust is built by being predictable. Predictable standards, predictable honesty, predictable boundaries. Sales isn't pretending to be someone softer than you are. Sales is setting the tone of the entire relationship. If you plan to challenge clients later, you must challenge prospects early, respectfully, but clearly. Leadership doesn't start after the sale. Leadership starts at first point of contact, because people don't trust intensity that appears out of nowhere. They trust consistency that was there from day one. If you need to shrink, soften, or silence yourself to get a client, you're not building a coaching relationship. You're buying future resistance. Be the same person before the sale as you are after it, and let alignment do the filtering for you. If you found this useful, make sure to drop me a like and subscribe for the next video that's going to be dropping soon. Right, that was class. See you next time.